Khoa, we got Yannik on the line. What do you want to ask him?
My first question is, when you first started, how can you get into those investors circle? How you get in touch with those accredited investor circle, like how you approach them or how you find them?
I like to let people know the first thing, what I'm doing, what I'm about, what we have to offer. And leveraging platforms like social media, Facebook, all sorts of social media. I think that's the easiest way to get your message out as quickly as possible. The second thing I think is figuring out what your investor avatar is, because there's a ton of capital out in the marketplace right now.
Hey, I'm Brian Briscoe, host of the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. And this podcast is different from everything else out there. I bring together new and aspiring investors on each and every episode and let the aspiring investors ask the questions that they need answered. And if you're an aspiring investor yourself, you probably have the same questions. So before you get to this episode that we have prepared for you, make sure you hit the subscribe button and that little notification bell to make sure you get notified every time we post a new episode. And now, enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. I'm your host, Brian Briscoe with Streamline Capital Group, and I'm very excited for today's show. It's another one of our Ask the Expert episodes, and we have two amazing people here on the line with us today. Experienced investor today is Yannik Virgil, and our aspiring investor is Khoa Nguyen. As is tradition, Yannik, you're first up to bat today. Baseball reference. Hope you don't mind that. Welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, Brian. Thanks so much. A little bit about me. My name is Yannik Virgil. I'm a multifamily investor and syndicator based in Baltimore, Maryland. My background is a little bit different. I came from a sports background, played for the Tennessee Titans, got into real estate after playing in the NFL, and it's been so great being able to just create financial freedom and create generational wealth for myself and my family. So really excited to be on the show.
Awesome. And yeah, great to have you on the show. And oh, by the way, I'll just plug your podcast as well, because I know we recorded an episode of your podcast, which is launching tomorrow from where we're recording this. But by the time this airs, you guys can all go back and check out his podcast. Actually, Yannik, tell us what the podcast name is and where to find it.
Well, thank you so much. It's called the Mogul Marathon Real Estate Podcast, hosted on the Believe Network. So definitely check it out. We have an amazing guest like yourself on the podcast, and it's all about ideas, insights, and strategies to help our audience become a real estate mogul. Really excited about the podcast.
Okay, awesome. So once again, encourage everybody to listen to it. And Yannik, make sure I have a link to the podcast so I can put it in the show notes for people who are interested. You mentioned you have every boy's childhood dream career, played college ball in Maryland, and then played for the Tennessee Titans. When you were going through college playing football, I mean, was the NFL, did you have like all your eggs in that basket, or what did that look like for you? What was your view of the future when you were playing college ball?
Honestly, I would say, I had all my eggs in one basket. And in hindsight, I think once you get older, you get a little bit more mature and you have different experiences throughout your life, and you see how things kind of play out, and you look back and say, well, I could have probably did this better. I could have probably did that better. But to be honest, to get to the level, and this is honestly my belief about any sort of craft, right? Whether it's real estate, whether it's football, whether it's being an engineer, whatever that you want to do. It's my belief that if you really want to be at the top 1% of the group of your industry, you have to put almost all your eggs in one basket. And I like to say that success comes with sacrifices. Sometimes, because of that, I wasn't able to spend a lot of time with my family. I wasn't able to build the relationships that I could have built throughout my time in college. But for me, I had to put all my eggs in one basket because I knew that my family, this was once in a lifetime opportunity for me to create generational wealth and create a future for my family. I wouldn't have changed it any bit.
I remember when I was growing up, I had aspirations to play professional baseball. I was one of those kids that was on the All-Star team every year. And I thought just by being on the All-Star team, I was a shoo-in for Major League Baseball. But my dad, I remember him telling me that I should have a backup plan. He's like, not many people go to the major leagues. You should probably have a backup plan. And what you say about putting all your eggs in one basket, I think looking back at it, I agree wholeheartedly. I took that backup plan to heart, and I never really focused on baseball because I was more focused on the backup plan. I think you're absolutely right. To be able to perform at the level you did, you really have to go all in. If I made any mistakes in my life, it's not having gone all in on certain things.
I mean, if you think about it, like the greats, you think about like LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan. You probably watched the Last Dance documentary. Those guys are maniacal about being great. And that's why they
Yeah.
were able to get to the top, is because their relentless pursuit to greatness. So that's
Yeah.
my belief.
When you look at all these people that have achieved greatness in sports, you talk to their teammates and they're always the hardest workers. They're always, they're always the first on the practice field and last one to leave, or they're always the ones that are watching the most film or doing the most to perfect their craft. And that was true in my high school sports. One of my best friends, and ended up being best man at my wedding. I was best man at his wedding, but he was the best in the state, and literally state record holder in his event. And he was exactly like that too. He was the hardest worker at practice. He was always there, never missed a set, never missed a rep. You really have to go all in to be able to do things. I think it's similar with real estate. Here's a question that you've probably heard once or twice before. How did your experience in the NFL help prepare you for a career in commercial real estate?
For me, the two things that come to top of mind is, the first thing is team. In this business, commercial real estate, you can't, when you're doing real estate, private equity, raising capital, doing syndications, there's a lot of hats that need to be on your head. And so if you're the one that's wearing everything, you're probably going to burn out. And so the ones that are able to be successful in this space know how to leverage team, know how to leverage partners. And that's what I took from the sports world, right? Was just knowing the importance of putting a team together, identifying certain characteristics that I can draw out of people that would fit well on my team. I think that's one of the things that I was able to really translate out of the sports space. And then the second thing was just being able to adapt during the times of chaos, right? Because real estate never goes 100% as planned. I've never had a deal that went exactly how I thought it was going to play out, especially from a pro forma perspective, right? So being able to adapt in tough circumstances, being able to move on the fly at times when things might be uncomfortable, those are the traits that you want to have in people that you are investing with, specifically operators too, because things happen, but you want to make sure that your operator is a wartime general and not just a peacetime general.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that reference, wartime versus peacetime general. I mean, speaking of the military reference, we always had the idea that you train harder in the peacetime than you'd ever see in war. And that was always our goal, is to try to make the training reps more exhausting and more complicated than hopefully people will ever see in war. But there's also the same thing that, it's still a lot different. It's a lot different when real bullets are being shot at you. I agree. The wartime generals come out with a much better experience than the peacetime generals do. Well, that said, let's talk a little bit about what you've done in the multifamily space so far.
Yep. So right now we're based in Baltimore, Maryland. We've done a couple of syndications. Right now we're operating 40 units specifically on the syndication side, over 2 deals. It's been an opportunity really to acquire assets in an area that we already own some smaller properties in. So simply what we did was just leverage our track record in this small neighborhood that we had personal properties in, and we had deals that came down the pipeline in the market, and we saw an opportunity to really kind of vertically integrate from a small neighborhood and grow that portfolio within Baltimore City. So far, so good, and we're always looking at opportunities and looking to put under contract some bigger deals this year.
Now, something I got to ask, not a lot of syndicators choose Baltimore for places to invest. Why Baltimore, and what do you think is good about that city?
The reason I like Baltimore is because it's a cash flow city. And for me, I'm all about 2 things: generational wealth and cash flow. Generational wealth for my family tomorrow, but cash flow today. And so that really drew me to the Baltimore market. And it always helps when you're from Baltimore, right?
Yep.
So you have that local market expertise. But when I look at markets, obviously the one of the top things that you want to look for is jobs, right? And Baltimore has one of the 3 more recession resistant job pools, right? When we talk about feds, eds, and meds, right? The federal government, educational jobs, and medical jobs. And so I'm all about just following the trends and following the demand factors. And obviously there's some red tape that needs to be followed when you're investing in Baltimore City, because it is one of the more tenant friendly cities. And you're going to have some cities like that because of historical events that have happened. But if you're able to just navigate it and understand the market and know how to play within that specific field, you can be successful, which is what we have been able to accomplish today.
I agree. I mean, I looked at Baltimore as a potential market to invest in, because when I started, I mean, you know this, maybe all the listeners don't, but I actually lived in Maryland, and Maryland by itself is a tenant friendly state. And then when you get into Baltimore City, it's like, other end of the spectrum tenant friendly. So, yeah, when I looked at it, for me, there was a big barrier to entry because I didn't understand the laws. I didn't know how to navigate those. But if you're local, and you absolutely are, you've lived in that area, for quite a while, you have that local knowledge, you have that street by street knowledge, what's going on in the city, and you know how to manage those landlord tenant laws. And I think that sets you apart, and that's going to make your investing there in Baltimore a lot more successful than people who are trying to invest from outside into Baltimore. How big is Baltimore population wise?
It's about 650,000 within the Baltimore City core.
And then when you get metro area, I mean, it's interesting because Baltimore. I don't know where Baltimore stops and DC starts when you're driving between the two. I would imagine metro area, you're talking several million.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of the more attractive corridors along the Mid-Atlantic region across the country. Sorry, on the East Coast of the country. It's one of the more recession resistant markets as well, because of the jobs from, like you said, from DC to Baltimore City. So it's a good market to invest in.
Yeah, and I like that. I never heard that said that the feds, eds, and meds. I mean, I do know there's a lot of federal government stuff there. NSA is just outside of Baltimore, and there's a lot of other things that are in that area as well. Interesting take on that one. I'll have to start looking into those feds, meds, and eds. All recession resilient. Makes sense. So let's talk about one of these properties you've done, one of the deals you guys have done. Pick your favorite one. Let's talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll do the most recent one, which was a 22-unit deal. We were really excited about this deal because we closed really right before, I think about 30 days before the Fed raised rates. And one of the things that we did to protect ourselves from any rate hikes or having that unpredictability in the future from a refinance perspective is we took on a construction to perm loan deal. So instead of going straight to agency and taking out agency debt and trying to refinance in year 2 or 3 after the value add opportunity is completed, what we did was we forecasted that rates were going to go up because we saw this inflation talk that the Fed kept saying, hey, it's transitory, but we're still dealing with it as we speak right now in August 2022, right? So we saw that in our ahead of us, and again, we just went to a credit union. It was a recourse loan, which isn't that favorable, but the terms were great. We were able to negotiate a 15-year term with 3 years IO at 3.75% fixed for the first 5 years. Repriced over 5-year Treasury. So at least that gives us some breathing room, right? So if we're able to get out of this high interest rate, I guess what we consider high interest rate environment, today's world, if we were able to ride that thing out in the next 5 years, we'll be fine. So at least we have the leverage to get out of the deal in 5 years. We don't have any prepayment penalties. So it's really important, I think, especially now looking at debt, because debt is always the biggest killer of real estate deals. It has the biggest factor when it comes to disposing of the asset, possibly. That's something that's really important, I think, in today's commercial real estate environment.
Yeah, and I mean, 3.7 fixed for 5 years in today's environment is huge, and that actually sounds a lot like the last loan that I had. The property we closed on, it's actually been 6 or 7 months, but we also had a 3.7. It was also repriced at 5 years. I don't remember if it was 2 or 3 years interest only. I'd have to go back to the documents, but I'll tell you, you mentioned that recourse loans, you basically are putting your personal net worth and your personal income on the line with a recourse loan. It's a little more risk that you're exposed to personally, but on the flip side, you do get a lot better terms. I mean, you can get that 3.7 fixed, that 3-year IO, where sometimes agencies aren't going to touch it. So there's trade-offs, and it may be the better thing, especially on some of those smaller properties. It may be better to go recourse and push that direction. Cool. Well, that's awesome. I think one more point that you made that I'd like to highlight is the debt does play a role when you're on the selling side as well, especially if you're getting most of your agency loans or most of your permanent loans come with prepayment penalties. If you don't choose your debt right and you have a prepayment penalty at the end, you could be in a position where you can't sell because that prepayment penalty is too high. So good points there. So tell us a little bit more. So you say 22 units at Baltimore. Tell us a little bit more about the business plan and how it's been so far.
Yeah, things have been great. For us, it's typically when you get into deals, the first year is probably going to be the hardest, right? And that's just my experience from deals that I've done in the past, whether it's for myself or working for a private equity firm before transitioning to becoming a full-time investor. The first year is probably the roughest year. And so sometimes, you run into situations where you get a little bit more delinquency than you anticipated. And then there's some other things, right? But for the most part, yes, we're doing well on this property, and things are moving from a unit renovation perspective, and we've had some supply chain issues that we've had to combat during this time. It's a smaller deal, so we toyed a little bit with the numbers and the logistics from a repair and maintenance side of things, and then also general contracting side of things. So we do have a part-time repair and maintenance guy who we've been able to spread across different assets that we've owned in that particular neighborhood, which absorbs some costs on the expense side for all properties. Things have been great, and we're just looking forward to pushing forward and getting our investors the returns that we projected.
I love that you're able to leverage all the properties in one neighborhood. That's one of the benefits of having things close together is, you've got enough single family assets and now multifamily assets that you have that maintenance guy that you can spread between properties, which makes you a little more flexible, and you're able to do things probably faster, especially on a 22 unit where you're waiting for property managers to hire crews. You've got one guy that's already working for you.
That's really important right there. That's really important, because the smaller properties are the ones that are more time intensive too, right? And when you have a 100 unit property, you can afford someone on staff. You can afford someone full time. When you have smaller assets, you don't necessarily have the income to hire someone full time. And so when you have a property management company on that property, they have to dispatch other vendors to take care of that tenant. So now that has a direct impact on you being able to satisfy your tenant, who you need to also keep in the bed because you want to keep the unit renovated, because you need to pay your investors a return. And so you understand the whole cycle that I'm getting to, right? So you can, the message is that I want to say, if you can, definitely get into properties that have more scale, because there's definitely more efficiencies to it, and it's just much more easier to manage and operate.
Yeah, and then there's I think we talked both sides of that coin now. You either have a cluster of properties, a lot of properties in a small area, or get larger properties. And either way, you can take advantage of scale to a certain standpoint. When you get into larger properties, you can allocate, 1, 2, 3, or several people for that individual property. When you have a cluster, you can just have, or a tight group of properties. You can have, people who are kind of rovers, so to speak. Shifting gears slightly here, let's talk about motivation and, why you're doing this. So Yannik, what's your big burning why?
For me, it's about, being the provider for my family. My background is I immigrated to this country when I was 10 years old. And we came with a bag of clothes, and fortunately, I've been able to work my way up and live my dream. And so every day, I'm living for my family. I want to be able to be the person that creates the generational wealth for the entire family, because a lot of times along the line, someone has to take that sacrifice, right? Someone has to take that sacrifice to build generational wealth. Is it going to be you? Is it going to be your kids? Is it going to be their kids? Someone has to do it. And then once it's created and you're able to teach and empower your family, now you have a wealthy family, right? But on the onset, someone has to take that sacrifice, and that's me. I'm taking the sacrifice. And so that's my why of why I get up every single morning, and I love this business, and it's really great. I love it.
Awesome. That's something I didn't know about you. You emigrated at the age of 10. I think that's something that when you and Khoa have in common. He came to the U.S. at age of 12, right, Khoa?
Right. Yeah. 12, 13. Yeah, I think 12.
Yeah.
Right.
Probably different countries. Yannik, I don't assume you came from Vietnam, did you?
I
No,
am.
no, I'm from the islands.
All right. So, yeah, we'll get the Khoa story in a minute. But Yannik, last question for you is what's next for you?
So for us, we're always looking at opportunities, looking at deals, value add opportunities. And one of the things that we've been interested in and also working on is development opportunities, specifically infill lots within Baltimore City. For anyone who doesn't know what an infill lot is, it's just a lot in an urban core, right? Taking advantage of some of those opportunities where you can have a development of maybe a 20 to 30 unit or 50 unit building in an urban core that's being turned around, and you're starting to see some spaces being useful within the community. And so being able to continue what we're doing and looking at value add opportunities, despite the high interest rates, despite the frenzy of capital that's coming into the market, shifting as well, and also looking at other accretive real estate opportunities that we can provide solid, fundamentally sound returns to our investors is something that we're working on as well. So we're really excited about the future.
All right. I'm excited to see it too. Sounds awesome. Infill in places like Baltimore is, I mean, when areas get developed to a certain point, infill becomes the new way to add value and a new way to develop properties. So great focus there, and best of luck to you. Switching gears again, we're going to bring our aspiring investor on today. So Khoa, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Brian, for having me on the show, and Yannik, it's a pleasure to be on the show with you. Before I start, I just want to tell you a little bit more about my background. I was, like you said, originally born in Vietnam, and I moved to the U.S. When I was about 12 years old, and I think I lived in Oklahoma since then. I have a medical background, so I'm a pharmacist. Graduated 2 years ago, but when we always want to invest in real estate forever. It's like when me and my wife live in college together, we're always joking around like it's gonna be nice to own an apartment because that's your cash flow machine. So we always have that thought, but we actually not actually start investing into like about a year ago. I just happened to read. I reached out for that book, and I was like, I have to do something, I have to take some action. So we start with single families, like me and my wife. We got to a certain point, and then we thinking to ourselves, we have to scale somehow. So we do research, we get out there more, and then we found syndication. So we learned about it, and it just blew my mind. Like that's the way it works, like you say, work together as a team, we all can get a bigger asset. So it just really amazed me. So from that point on, we still focus, like in that. But yeah, I mean, that's how I guess started. I'll be involved in multifamily space.
Yeah. I think a lot of people do the same thing. I think single family is a little more accessible to the average person. So people start with the single family properties and get to the point where like, I like this. I've seen proof of concept. I see, the theoretically this is going to work. Now I got to figure out how to scale it. And a lot of people to try to scale migrate towards multifamily. So I think that's a very common theme that I've heard in the podcast. And this is going to be like episode 320 or something like that. And it's, you're following the same path as a lot of people. So hopefully we can we get you into some of those larger properties yourself. But so what's your big burning why? What's your motivation for doing all this?
You probably hear this a lot as well, but creating wealth, it's just like, I have two why. First one is creating wealth. I really want to I have more time control, time freedom to, so I can spend my time more efficiently, because I know time is limited, cannot get more time, it's sad, and you don't know when just end. Ability to control my time is something I really, want to do. And then the second that is that I really want to help the Vietnamese communities, just my local Vietnamese community, or, the bigger the better, to be more involved in real estate. And not just by educating, I really want to like encourage and inspire, the community that it is possible. Because, as immigration myself, my parents have a very old thinking about investing, and then you go to school, you get a degree, and that's it. And I know a lot of people have that same. And then Vietnamese, we really like humble and reserved. We really don't want to like talk tell other people what we're doing. So we kind of just tend to do it ourselves, and then just kind of do that. But syndication is something that I think is really, I mean, fascinating. Like I mentioned earlier, you come together, you work, and to achieve a bigger goal. So that's where we want to also as well to kind of like influence or like educate, get more of Vietnamese community either locally or like I said, the bigger the better, to be more involved in this space. Yes, it's just really valuable.
Yeah, love it. Well, here comes my favorite part of the show. Khoa, we got Yannik on the line. What do you want to ask him?
Awesome. Well, Yannik, like this space, you have like two different important, one important thing is capital, and then other one is like find you for the capital. So I really want to touch on those questions. My first question is, when you first started, how can you get into those investors circle? How you get in touch with those accredited investor circle, like how you approach them or how you find them? That's
a good question.
Yeah. I think a lot of people struggle with getting investors to start off because maybe they don't have the network, maybe they don't know how to approach investors. I always lead from a place of, first thing is value, right? So I like to let people know the first thing, what I'm doing, what I'm about, what we have to offer, and leveraging platforms like social media, Facebook, all sorts of social media. I think that's the easiest way to get your message out as quickly as possible. The second thing I think is figuring out what your investor avatar is, because there's a ton of capital out in the marketplace right now, but you want to figure out who your investor avatar is. So for us, it's professional athletes, it's business owners, and regular W-2 income owners who want to just put their money to work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what we do is we leverage social media to put out content that targets that specific audience. And the biggest thing that I've learned, and also I've learned from Brian, because he's just a master LinkedIn poster / social media expert.
Yeah. I've only posted six posts on LinkedIn while we're recording this podcast. So I mean, yeah, I'm teasing. Zero's the answer, but yeah.
So I think just focusing on your avatar, figuring out exactly who you want to target, and posting on social media is I think it's the easiest route to start off. And then for us, it's a matter of just Googling and figuring out, okay, where do these people typically hang out? A lot of times they're not going to hang out at other investor meetups, right? I think when I say investor meetups, I mean investor events, right? So I think a lot of people might go to different events and think they're going to meet their next $500,000 raise, right?
Yeah.
Full of maybe 10 people, right? I think that's the biggest misconception that people have when getting into this space, is that you're going to find your investors at another real estate event where other people are also looking for investors. So for us, it's figuring out, okay, if we want to target business owners, can we go on Eventbrite and look up different meetings and different events that we know that business owners are going to be at? And that's where we start going to and start meeting those folks, not, other investor events that other people are trying to raise money. So I think using those two tactics or those two strategies are a really good way to start off and kickstart your journey to attracting those investor clients.
Yeah, I agree. It's just a matter of finding where the investors hang out. And I'm reiterating a lot of what he said, finding where investors hang out and getting your message in front of them. And the one thing that I'll add is it's very much an iterative process. I mean, you try one thing, and if it looks like it's working, you double down. And if it looks like it's not working, figure out why and adjust, and you adjust your strategy. Eventually you're going to land on something that works. And I mean, even with all I do on LinkedIn, I mean, we're closing fast on 8,000 followers, and I don't actively reach out to people to get them to follow me, but all organic. But I still have posts that fail, posts that I throw up there, and 2 days later I've gotten 1 like and 0 comments. So a lot of it is just learning. Learning what works and what doesn't, and how to get your message to more and more people.
Perfect. Awesome. So it's
Perfect.
Kind of like,
that's perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
So branding and your target audience is something focusing on. Great thing you mentioned branding. This is one of the question I have as well. So I know branding is very, powerful, or social media are very powerful.
Mhm.
And so like, is there such a thing as like too many like act like posts, or is there like, what's a good balance on like, posting or engaging with that? Is that once a day? Is that good? Or what are your take on that social branding?
I'll probably defer to Brian because again he's a social media expert. I think for us, I really, from what I'm hearing and I've learned and I've researched, this topic a ton of times. I don't think everyone says different things. I think different things work for different people, maybe in different spaces. I would say the one thing for us is just when the most traction I've been able to get on social media happened when I've been able to be consistent and have a consistent message on there. And I think consistency breeds success, right? And when you're able to marry that with social media is when I think you're able to have the most success, which is why we've hired a media manager to focus on that full time. Because myself, I'm an investor. I like to raise capital and do deals, and I can't necessarily be on my phone and pressing the button to schedule posts and do all of that. So being able to find a way to be consistent and create that content and leverage different platforms like Loomly or Buffer to help you schedule that content out helps you with the consistency piece.
Yeah.
I don't know, Brian, maybe you have some better strategies for that.
Yeah, I think those are great strategies. The one thing that I'll talk about is the frequency. Most social media platforms reward people for producing content, right? So the more content you put out, the more likely your LinkedIn and your Facebook and your Twitters or whatever social media platform you're on is going to show that to people. So the more active you are, they reward you for being more active, right? So if you're posting daily, and that's a lot of work, if you're posting daily, you're going to get more attention from the social media algorithms than if you're posting weekly. So more is better, but you have to find that balancing point, like Yannik was talking about. I mean, if you're busy doing other things, like, I don't know, finding deals, you may not have a ton of time to spend tapping away with your thumbs on social media during the day. So part of it's a balance point. And then one more thing that Yannik said that I'd love to highlight is find somebody that can help you, or find ways to leverage your time, whether it's hiring out the social media part, or using your buffers, your Loomlys, your other scheduling tools and editing tools to be able to get that stuff out.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much for the answer.
Perfect.
Going back to like the investor. So whenever we have like a list of investors, for example, and then like how when I just started out, I don't have any deals coming yet. So we don't. So my question is like, what advice you have for like new investors to kind of like keep the investor kind of like engaged, and then like keep the momentum for the investor, because you can just like if it's been too long, then the investor might be die out. So like how would you guys, when you start out, in like keep the investor engaged and keep the momentum when you don't have any deal to present to them yet?
That's a really good question, because it's hard when, specifically in syndication, when you have a ton of different hats that you're wearing. And now you also want to keep your investors involved in the process of you finding the deals and underwriting the deals, because you don't want your leads that were just hot. Hey, they just committed 50,000, 100,000 to you, but you want those leads to stay hot. So the best way to do that is, again, like Brian said, was to leverage other people's time, or leverage other resources, apps like Active Campaign, MailChimp, to do that marketing for you on a weekly or monthly basis. And now you're able to consistently touch your list or your investors and keep them warm while you're going through this entire process, because you don't have the time to call your investors every week to say, hey, I'm still working on the deal, just I'll follow up with you in about a week or two. Right? You have apps like social media and like Active Campaign that help you strategically put that together. And the beauty about those systems is that it's like set it and forget it most of the times. For 80% of our marketing is set it and forget it, and then 20% is where on a quarterly basis we might change different things depending on what's going on in the environment. And then on a monthly basis, we send out monthly newsletter about what's going on in the market, just to give our investors some active information about what's going on in the market. So I think leveraging those different platforms are a great way to keep your investors in touch. And I think, maybe quarterly, if you want to take a Friday and just call up your investors and just kind of keep the fire burning a little bit more, that's a great thing to do. But definitely on the onset, if you can leverage the platforms like Active Campaign, it's going to save you so much time and keep that seat warm for you and your investors.
Yeah, there's a lot of automations, a lot of ways to make this easy. I love Active Campaign. It's what I use myself. It gives you a lot of analytics too when you send out emails, so you know who's opening, which is great as well. So you can see who's a little more interested, maybe a little more interested in your product. As far as leveraging other people, there's also people and services who will give you pre-written content. So newsletters. I know Camilla Jess, for example, she's been on the podcast I think twice now. She offers that as a service as well, where she'll give pre-written newsletters about, multifamily designed for passive investors. And it's for a couple $100, you can get an annual subscription to Active Campaign and a bunch of newsletters. And then in a couple of hours, set it out to go, once a month, twice a month, or however you want. And that's going to help keep the investors warm, between your first contact and their first, I like you, I'd love to invest with you, and when you actually have that first deal. That said, we're about out of time. So one last question for each of you. Yannik, you get to go first. How can listeners learn more about you?
For our company, it's called Merlin Acquisitions. That's MERLYNN acquisitions.com. We love providing value. We have a free due diligence checklist for any investor that's trying to navigate one of the most important parts in the acquisition process is due diligence for a commercial real estate asset. As I mentioned, the podcast is going live tomorrow. I'm super excited about that. Definitely follow the podcast, the Mogul Marathon Real Estate Podcast. And any way that I can help, definitely go to our website and send us an email, and hopefully we can set up a 10-15 minute chat to talk about real estate.
Awesome. And Khoa, same thing for you. How can listeners learn more about you?
Right. I'm pretty active on our social platform as well. Name is Khoa Nguyen. It's KHOA and then it's NGUYEN. I also have my company website, KNNcapitalpartners.com. We have article in there as well. And then KNN Capital Partners also on social media as well, so that you can reach out to me. And then again, we locate in Oklahoma, so love to be boot on the ground for anybody who is in the state if possible, and love to connect and learn more about how we can all help each other.
All right, awesome. Hey, thanks guys for coming on the show. Very much appreciate your time, and forward to talking to you guys again, hopefully soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Yannik.
Thanks for being on the show.
Hey, if you like that episode, make sure to subscribe. But more importantly, if you haven't joined our multifamily educational community yet, which we call a Tribe of Titans, you are missing out. Get 30 days free by clicking the link in the description to this episode, or go to thetribeoftitans.info, and we'll see you there.